A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. So, we will start the day with a book of the day. So, today I'm going to talk about the book, The Paradox of Choice. So, this is written by Barry Schwartz, and the author is an American psychologist. So, what the author talks about is that we often crave for choices in life. We want choice from everything, starting from the clothes we wear to every small thing in life. We need choice. And even when the LPG era started in India in 1991, one of the major argument was that we need to have more choices, being the customers, as against the monopoly by the state, where the service providers were just one or two and we really didn't have any choice about that. So we always as human beings have craved for choices, and we talk about the right to make our choice, right to have a choice. But what this paradox of choice talks about is sometimes many times we do crave for choice, but sometimes how having a lot of choice can actually lead to miserable lives, depression, and a tendency to make mistakes, and also a not so happy and a satisfied life. So the author goes on to give many examples for this. So, for instance, in one of the experiments that was conducted, there were two groups of people. One group was asked to select snacks for 1 week. So what the group did was they selected only one type of snack, which was their favorite snack for the entire week, and they were very happy about it that they have selected their favorite snack. The other group was asked to select snacks from a variety of snacks for a period of 3 weeks. So, what the people assumed was that because they have to eat snacks for a period of 3 weeks, and so if they choose their favorite snack, they will be disappointed, or they will be bored of eating their favorite snack because they will have to eat it over a period of 3 weeks. So they ended up not just choosing their favorite snacks, but also they chose a variety of snacks, some of which they didn't even taste before. So as to keep that variety, and so that they are not bored over a period of 3 weeks. But after the end of 3 weeks, this group of people was not as satisfied as the first group of people who had chosen just one favorite snack for the entire week. So many such experiments were conducted, and it was found that when the choice given to individuals is more, first of all, too much of time and energy is spent on analyzing these choices, and even out of 10 choice, if one choice is actually made at the end, but still the human being is aware that there were actually 9 more other choices which he could have selected from. So, if something goes wrong with the choice that he made, the human being has a tendency to blame himself or herself for the wrong choice that he made. In fact, this is considered to be one of the important causes of clinical depression cases in the United States also. So, from this story, what you can say is it gives a different perspective to in a globalized era. Today we have COVID, and therefore countries will be in future looking more inwards. They would want to um, create more barriers at the boundaries and not allow so much free flow of people or capital. So, when we are talking in terms of globalization, liberalization, and the entire globe being one village and providing more choices to the people, this offers a fresh perspective, which is a paradox of choice. So, how in some cases, having fewer choices is actually good for us. It doesn't create that emotional stress and burden on us to select the best choice, and also we will be more satisfied with the choice that we have made, rather than when we have so many things and we select one and we are comparatively not so satisfied. So this paradox of choice, and by quoting the author, you can use it in say for instance an essay which talks about globalization and the changing nature of globalization, or the anti-globalization tendency that the COVID crisis may give rise to. So with this, we will move to the first topic of the day, which is the locust swarm. So in this case, the basic thing that is in news is that the swarms of locusts have now crossed the Indo-Pakistan boundary, and they have now been sighted in Rajasthan, in Gujarat, even in Madhya Pradesh, and to some extent in Maharashtra also. So in GS2, you have farmers and agriculture related issues, food security and all that. So in that you can put this topic. So now let us understand what are the basics about it. So first is we must understand what is a locust. So locust is nothing but it's a species of a short-horned grasshopper. All right. So it has two important features that usually they can form swarms, and these swarms become highly mobile. So when they form swarms, then they will be extremely mobile and they can travel for a very long distances also. And the second thing is that these locusts, according to some estimate, they can eat food that is enough for as many as 2,500 people. So one small swarm of locusts can eat food that is enough for as many as 2,500 people, that too in a single day. So this shows that the locust swarm can be a huge threat on the one hand to the food security of India, and on other hand to the farmers who are already now facing a crisis, agrarian crisis, and not able to get remunerative prices for their produce. So these will be the two things that will be hit because of the locust swarm. So now we have to understand that this year what has led to their early arrival. In fact, way back in 2018, there were cyclonic storms in Mekunu and Luban, both of which are in Oman and Yemen, respectively. So, these cyclonic storms happened in 2018. So, because of the cyclonic storms, it brought a huge amount of rainfall in the desert tracts in Africa also. So, this continued even through the 2019. So this created favorable conditions for the breeding of the locusts. So these locust swarms started attacking the crops in East Africa in last November, and now after that they entered Iran, and then they entered Pakistan, and then now they have entered India. So it is because of these cyclonic storms in the desert regions which created the good conditions for breeding of these perfect conditions for breeding of the swarms. So that is the reason for their early arrival this time. So next we will have to see what is the role of LWO. So LWO is nothing but Locust Warning Organization. So now this is situated in Jaipur, and this has the responsibility to one, monitor the situation of their arrival, etc., and also to tackling such swarms. So what is to be, how they need to be tackled will be taken care by LWO, which is Locust Warning Organization. Sorry, it is not in Jaipur, it is in Jodhpur. Okay, so and also past instances, yes, definitely there were past instances from 1964 to 1997. There were already 13 locust upsurges. But after 2010, there was no large-scale breeding. So this is being said to be one of the worst locust storms in the last 2 decades. The next thing is, what is the role of the Indian Ocean Dipole in this? So we need to first understand what is Indian Ocean Dipole for that. So Indian Ocean Dipole can be either positive or it can be negative. So in the case of a positive Indian Ocean Dipole, the Western Indian Ocean is warmer than the Eastern Indian Ocean. So therefore, due to warmer waters, the air will start rising above and a low pressure area is created. Clouds are formed in this region and the air will start descending here. This will be a high pressure area, and here the clouds are formed and it will lead to more rainfall. So a warmer Western Indian Ocean will lead to more rainfall in Eastern Africa and in the Indian subcontinent. But a negative Indian Ocean Dipole will lead to the reverse. That is, there will be more rainfall in this part, but there will be less rainfall in the Western Indian Ocean if it is a negative Indian Ocean Dipole. So in this case, what happened this year was that it was a positive Indian Ocean Dipole. So because of the positive Indian Ocean Dipole, the Western Indian Ocean was warmer. It led to more convection and formation of more clouds and thus more rains in this particular region, particularly in Eastern Africa and all that. So there were more rains in Africa and also in the Indian subcontinent, and this rain coupled with the temperature provided perfect breeding conditions for this locust swarms. So that is why they were able to multiply and breed, and they have now been able to travel such long distances. So one of the factors which has aided this locust swarm presently can be attributed to the positive Indian Ocean Dipole. So next is, what is the role of COVID-19 lockdown? So because of the lockdown, two things happened. One is that the countries in the neighborhood like Pakistan, Afghanistan, India and all would coordinate regarding the arrival of these locusts so that action can be taken on them. But because of the COVID crisis, these countries were not able to coordinate among each other. That was one issue. The second was that when they are about to come, then pesticides will be sprayed. So these pesticides will definitely help in killing the locusts. But because of the lockdown, these pesticides also could not be sprayed on the plants. So therefore, it is very much likely that when these locusts attack, then the crops will be eaten away. Next is what is important for us to understand is, if you look at the kind of disasters that have been happening, so there are desperate disasters, like on the one hand you have floods. So next you have the pandemics, and then you have the pestilence. So in this you can now put cyclone also, the recent cyclone. So you can see how global warming and climate change is actually bringing several separate disasters. It is being linked because of global warming. So it shows how there are already existing disasters, but how because of global warming they can occur back to back, they can get linked to one another, and how it can bring about that much more destruction in the world. So this is what it's about. So now we have clearly understood what the locust swarm is and what is its impact on the agriculture, food security and the farmers. So one small swarm can eat up to 2,500 people's food in one single day itself. So that is the severity of the problem. And you know what has led to this year's swarm being one of the most destructive? It's because of those conditions in Eastern Africa and Indian subcontinent, because of a positive Indian Ocean dipole. So I hope you will be able to write all this. So the next topic is the migrant issue. So even previously we have already discussed the migrant issue in detail. So the reason I'm taking it up today is because of some new and important data that was covered in the article. So the first thing is, according to the 2011 census, the internal migrant population was put at 309 million. And according to 2011 census, the internal migrants population was put at 450 million. So this shows that there is an increase of 45% from 2001 to 2011. Now, if you compare the growth in the internal migrants to the growth in the population during this period, in this period of one decade, our population grew at the rate of 18%. But in the same period, the internal migrants have grown at the rate of 45%. So this shows how much more is the growth rate of the internal migrants, even when the population is growing just at the rate of 18%. So this is a very important data to show the severity of the issue, and also why these migrants, internal migrants, are an important and the most vulnerable section, and they are very strong in number, like 450 million, which is a very good number. And having that much number of vulnerable population definitely requires a lot of steps to be taken for them. So this is one important statistic that you need to remember. Second, the article also dealt with the solution, which therefore has to be targeted at these vulnerable sections, which amount to 450 million in people. So the first thing is the rebuilding of the rural economy. Why do we need to do that? Because of the migrant crisis, now the migrants are heading back to their villages. So there is a tendency of what is called as reverse migration. So when there is reverse migration of the migrants from cities back to their villages, it is important that that rural economy is revived, so that in the rural areas, back in their homes, these migrants are able to find a job and employment, so that this crisis doesn't worsen further. So we have to rebuild the rural economy. So how do we do this? We can encourage cottage industries, and we have to incentivize such that the raw materials will be taken from the rural industries. So we need to set up based on the strength of the villages. If it is good in some textiles, then set up a textile industry, or if it is good in some wooden work, set up that industry. So based on the strength of the village, we need to revive the rural industries. The second important step we need to take is to equip and empower. So empower home, particularly artisans. So several rural areas have these traditional artisans who have their own traditional skills. So we need to empower them with better skills, design which is more contemporary, with better capacity building, access to technology, access to capital, and also access to a worldwide market. So this is what we have to do for the artisans to equip and empower. The third thing we need to do is funding plus decentralization. Why decentralization? Because now people are going back to the village areas. So the Panchayati Raj institutions will be the ones which are responsible for handling things in the rural areas. So therefore, more power needs to be given in a decentralized manner to the PRIs so that they are able to encourage the revival of the rural economy. So for this, giving them more powers without giving them enough resources is of no use. So funding must also increase for the Panchayati Raj institutions, and more decentralization of power has to take place. The fourth important thing to be done is the increase in the allocation. So when we talk of allocation, first is on health, next on education, and then women and children. So this whole thing should attract at least 20% of the national budget should be spent on these four important areas. So these are the four important prescriptions in the article to tide over the migrant crisis and how the rural economy can be revived. Next is we come to conditions of the migrants. This is actually based on another separate article on the same issue. So one thing is clear, that this migrants issue is actually led to a humanitarian crisis. So this is very clear by now, and because of this humanitarian crisis, it has led to reverse migration. It has led to the labor crisis in the cities, because people are now heading back to the villages and there are nobody at the industries. So it is leading to job losses and employment crisis for the people. So these are the important things that has given rise to this humanitarian crisis. So when we talk of the conditions of the migrants, the most important thing to be done in order to improve their condition is to have accurate data about how many migrants are there in the country. Only then we will be able to support them. But however, it is not reported under the census or any survey, but this too has its own reasons. For instance, when these migrants are in the urban areas, they are often involved in a very grueling work schedule, and there is no but one day which they can call it as a rest day where they are at homes. So therefore they always have a grueling work schedule, so access to them, to know about them and their families, is very difficult. The second thing is that usually many of these migrants who are working, say for instance as construction workers, they end up living in those construction sites itself, which are often heavily guarded. So there is no access to them to be able to analyze and collect data about them. So all of these things, because no concrete data about them is available, this has led to erosion of the labor rights, and they lack the social protection also, and this also shows the apathy of the state government when it relates to the labor laws. So when we talk of conditions of migrants, collection of accurate data is very important, but there are hindrances to it, like the grueling work schedule of the workers, and they living in the construction sites itself, which are heavily guarded. So however, collection of accurate data is very important if any steps for their empowerment is to be taken. So in the next there was one article on enjoying the fruits of their labor, so which speaks about the recent reforms in the APMC which have been announced as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. So under which the farmer will have the freedom to sell his or her produce anytime, anywhere, and not just in one particular APMC mandi. So this we have already discussed in detail, the pros and the cons on 2 different days. So there was nothing new in the article, so I'm not discussing this. Second is there was this article on losing the plot, which talks about the Maharashtra crisis, where the chief minister has to get elected to the legislative council, and how the governor of Maharashtra was not willing to nominate the chief minister as a member of the legislative council. So we have discussed this issue also in detail when we were discussing about the issue of governors. So there was nothing new in this article, so I'm not discussing it. So next was Brazil puts onus on India to balance the world sugar market. So what Brazil is saying is that Brazil has undertaking 27% ethanol blending, or there is 100% ethanol is also used as fuel in Brazil. But in India, the ethanol blending is very low. So if India is able to divert more towards ethanol making and ethanol blending, then less of the sugar cane will be diverted in making sugar. So if there is less sugar that is made, so it will improve the overall sugar prices in the global market. So if more of sugar cane is diverted towards making ethanol, so less of sugar cane will be available for making sugar. So if the sugar production reduces, then the price of the sugar in the international market will improve, because at this point of time there is already a glut in the global market. So this also we have already discussed in detail when we were discussing about the impact of the oil price meltdown on the Indian sugar industry. So this also has already been discussed, so I'm not discussing this also in detail. Next is I had asked a question yesterday on the role of FDI in as an investment model, but today I have reached home extremely late, so I'm not able to I will discuss this and today's question tomorrow itself. Both the questions I'll be discussing. So let's see today's question. Reverse migration due to COVID. So this is prevalent. So a revival of the rural economy is thus very important. So you have to suggest measures for revival of the rural economy. So it's a 10 marker question and 150 words. And when I say it is a 10 marker question, I want to reiterate again that when it is a 10 marker question, you have to write more number of points. So it is not that you are writing just 2-3 points and analyzing each of these points in detail. That is not how a 10 marker question is to be written. So you have to write as many number of points as you know. So I have been repeatedly telling that in a 10 marker question, width is more important than depth. So don't go in detail. So if you have an example, you just have to write an example. And because you know, I know, you have to believe that even the evaluator will know. So if you just mention the name of the example, that is enough. So you don't have to assume that the the evaluator will be ignorant of this, and don't be tempted towards explaining this example in another 3-4 lines. So don't do that. Just write 1-2 lines points and write more number of points. So that's it for today. Thank you.